Hi and welcome to the next video in my best of skincare series for 2025. This is a year in review kind of mini series where I'm just going over my favorite products of the year. The category I've got today is serums, or I guess treatment products, so let me know in the comments if you have any specific questions and I'll get straight into the list. Now I'm actually going to start this list with 5 non-negotiables. So I have 5 particular serums that I use always and I have used for years. These don't ever leave my routine, they're kind of constants in rotation. So I'm just going to quickly go over 5 non-negotiables that are automatic favorites that really form the kind of baseline of my skincare routine. And then I'll move on to specific 2025 favorite that I often use to sort of interchange, or sometimes I'll layer. So the 5 non-negotiables I'm sort of calling my serum essentials, and that include Deliverance, Naturium's vitamin C complex serum, Build Skincare B Gel, the Naturium Multi-Peptide Advanced Serum, and of course a prescription retinoid. So just quickly to describe each serum, Deliverance is a long-time favorite. It's a weightless milky texture, it contains niacinamide at its core, but it also has a bunch of soothing extracts and a key peptide called matrixylmorphomics. So this combination just really suits what I'm looking for in skincare as a daily maintenance product. Build B Gel is a little bit newer to my routine. I think it came out last year, but I've pretty much had it in rotation ever since. It's a blend of 6 humectants that are a little bit lesser used or a little bit lesser touted. But the main reason I like this is because of the texture. It starts off as a gel, but then bursts into like a watery freshness, almost like an essence on the skin. And it gives like a true wet skin feeling. So it's like a rush of hydration. And basically it's just my use anytime, anywhere product. I'll layer it with most things. I'll use it straight out of the shower. I'll apply like a thick layer as a mask. If I'm simplifying my routine, I'll just use B Gel. So it's just my don't think about product. I know it's never going to irritate and it'll work back with everything. The Naturium Vitamin C Complex, I think I've been using since 2021, so it's been years and years. Of course, it acts as an antioxidant, but the real reason I love this is because Naturium uses sodium ascorbyl phosphate, but also ascorbic acid that's been conjugated to gold. And because of this conjugation, they're able to put the ascorbic acid in a higher pH formulation base. So it means it's not as irritating as most ascorbic acid serums can be. And my skin just kind of freaks out with ascorbic acid at a low pH. So I love that I can integrate this without thinking and it never causes any problem. And another really well-designed product from Naturium is the Multi-Peptide serum. This is a really cost-effective way of integrating one of the key expression line peptides that are around, Azelaic, and they specifically use the amplified version, so I know it's the newer technology. But aside from the peptide, it's really the texture that I love here. It's super milky and creamy and silky and just makes my skin feel more perfected when I use it. And of course, the prescription retinoid, I started on tretinoin in 2020 thereabouts, and then I've had some on and off periods as I've been testing other things like retinaldehyde, for example. But pretty much I'm always on a prescription retinoid. Now the TGA in Australia is a little bit fussy on discussing prescription products, so I don't know exactly what I'm allowed to say or what brands I can mention. So you'll have to forgive me for keeping this vague, but I just wanted to pass on that I do rely on a prescription retinoid. It is probably the most important step in my routine outside of a sunscreen, and nothing else matters without it. So I just can't brag about it too much because I don't know what I can say, but know that it's there, and I highly recommend a prescription retinoid, or at least a retinoid to everyone. Now moving on to the actual top list of 2025 specifically, and I'll start with what I consider to be the best moisturizing serum of the year, and that's the Paula's Choice 7% Ectoin Booster. Paula's Choice is a brand that I really don't vibe with generally. I disagree with nearly all of their marketing techniques completely. So this brand I don't love to feature because I really think they've damaged the industry. That's a rant for another video. But I also like to give credit where it's due, and I think they've designed this extremely well and extremely thoughtfully. It's a water and oil emulsion, so it feels a lot richer than most standard serums, but they've done it in the way where they've maintained a lot of silkiness. The risk of water and oil products is sometimes they can get quite greasy and they feel extremely suffocating on the skin, but this is intense enough to be very moisturizing, but light enough to not feel cloying. It truly just glides on the skin and feels like liquid silk, and I love that they've included Ectoin at a 7% concentration, because this matches the kind of medical device status throughout Europe for managing more dermatological driven conditions. And what that means, it's basically recognized as a skin protectant. A lot of brands aren't using Ectoin at this level. So I think it's cool that they've done that because you're probably getting peak potential of the ingredient. So using this results in a happier, calmer and dewier complexion. And I love to use it at night especially. But I do have one complaint, and I don't really understand why they've called this a booster. It's a moisturizing serum. It really doesn't work very well mixed into other things. I think it's definitely better as a standalone. But I think they kind of did this for price reasons, because by calling it a booster, they've offered it at a 20ml fill or a 20ml volume, which is far less than the industry standard of at least 30 mils in a serum. So they've kind of invented this category, I think, just for marketing reasons to charge more. And that's a real shame, because this should have been a regular serum, ideally with a pump at a 30ml concentration, and the price point is a little bit crazy, but that is what it is, and I suggest just waiting for a sale. Next up is what I'm calling the best treatment serum, which is the Regimen Lab Azelaic Advanced, and I think they really smash this texture. Azelaic acid is super difficult to work with, and for them to be able to achieve this type of watery texture while still maintaining efficacy is really cool. Now, I wouldn't say that this product is like perfect. The texture is a little bit slippy, so there's a bit of like an oil component. It can take a moment or two to absorb, but once it does absorb, it feels super lightweight and it is very easy to layer. And normally that could be a deal breaker, but because azelaic acid is so complicated to formulate with, the sort of small drawbacks of this serum are still way ahead of the curve of nearly every other brand out there. Now, specifically, this contains 10% azelaic acid with another 10% of azelaic acid derivatives. So just the whole medley of ingredients that they use here are super considerate and very much targeting redness and inflammation in the skin, and will also help with texture and just clarity overall. I've historically recommended and suggested Phoenicia or another like OTC prescription style azelaic because I just had more trust in their ability to deliver a therapeutic dose, which I don't think a lot of other brands are able to do. But the Regimen product, at least in my use of it, has offered me very similar results to Phoenicia, but in an even easier to use texture. Plus, I love that they're a small indie brand out of Canada, and I just have a soft spot for Canadian brands. The next category is the best peptide serum, and I actually emptied it not too long ago, so I don't have it here to show you. I'm just going to hold up another Medik8 product for visual aid. But of course, it's the Medik8 Liquid Peptides Advanced MP, which looks similar to this, just the peptide product is in a full black packaging container. I love that the Liquid Peptides Advanced MP is like a cross between of new biotech in the form of MiniProteins, but they've also still married that back with quite a high concentration of industry-leading peptides. So it's really hard to pass this up as a very well concentrated and comprehensive peptide product. This is something that Lab Muffin has also discussed recently in a reel, but the whole concept around MiniProteins is that just the shape of them means that they have a better affinity with the skin and the skin receptors. So they're probably more likely to exert a benefit maybe at a lower dosage. And I was really happy to see Michelle discuss this because of course I'd read Medik8's information on it, but getting some confirmation that that theory actually applies is really cool. I also happen to really enjoy the texture of this. It's milky and silky, a little bit gelled feeling, but it does create a bit of a second skin effect. So there's a level of like film going on here. Some people are more sensitive to the sensation of a film on their skin. So I've had some feedback that the film is a bit too noticeable. I found it to be quite weightless and had no issue layering it, considering how comprehensive it is while utilizing the new MiniProteins. And I also consider the whole concept of MiniProteins to be much more interesting and compelling than other social media trending things like PDRN or exosomes. Next up is what I'm calling the best rejuvenating serum, which I guess is another way of saying like a one and done serum. My favorite of the year was the Sweet Chemistry product. Now what I'm holding up here is their elasticity cream. My favorite is actually the Hydra-Serum, which is very similar packaging to this but slightly smaller bottle. I don't have it because also I emptied it a couple weeks ago, and unfortunately Sweet Chemistry doesn't ship to Australia, so they sent it to me in like a PR sample package so I was able to test it, but I don't have a way of buying it, so I've been forced into using the cream instead. The cream is lovely, it's just a little bit richer, and I found the serum version easier to integrate within my routine. And the serum is the lightest of their textures with just like a little bit of nourishment there, but much more layerable than the other products which are more dedicated. I think lately we've all noticed how a lot of skincare brands are acting like fast fashion in a way, and just these constant releases, a lot of it is replicating other brands. So what I've really been trying to look for this year is brands offering a level of originality. And Sweet Chemistry is doing that like no other. You know, they've worked with a regenerative medicine company that's actually created this whole ingredient that they call Matrikynes, which is based on extracellular matrix derived bovine peptides from upcycled waste. And that's supposed to be like this peptide concoction or medley of different things found in the extracellular matrix that are supposed to help with lines and wrinkles and redness and even some hyperpigmentation. Now, this is not like a super intense treatment, so I don't think it's like a saving grace for any one thing specifically. But if you're the person that has like a little bit of everything going on, so you're starting to be concerned with lines and wrinkles, you have a bit of inflammation and redness, there's some level of hyperpigmentation going on, then a serum like this really targets a lot of those avenues all in one. But if your issues are a little bit more chronic, then you'd probably need dedicated treatments outside of that. I hope that makes sense. The concept of their Matrikyne technology is very unique and exclusive, and just showcases that, or at least there are some brands out there still trying to come up with uniqueness. Next up is the best exfoliating serum, which I've actually given to a fairly gentle option, and that's the Murad Heartleaf Glycolic Serum, or they call it the Heartleaf Gentle Resurfacing Serum. I've discussed in previous videos how I mostly rely on lotion P50 for my exfoliation, which is more of a watery toner. But what I really like about this Murad product is the glycolic is offered in a microdose controlled release fashion, so it doesn't really even feel like it's exfoliating. It's just super gentle refinement over time. So there are some days or weeks when I back off lotion P50 just because my skin is freaking out from other things, the environment, from too much tretinoin, for example. But this way I'm still able to maintain refinement without getting any zing or barrier disruption in my skin. And they've really fortified this with a lot of calming extract. So it just helps a lot with redness and inflammation as well. An extremely well-designed product and another example of what I would consider to be quite a unique offering. Next is what I'm calling the best soothing serum, and that goes to the Rationale, the milk concentrate, or number 5, the milk concentrate. So this is quite a complex product where you've got amino acids and ceramides and a microbiome complex. But I think what's particularly interesting to me is that they also include some antibacterial, antifungal ingredients. So think like pyrooctone-olamine, which is normally like an anti-dandruff product. But I think the fact they've included this, along with a lot of the classic anti-redness ingredients, just really makes this a super considered serum where it's sort of targeting inflammation and rosacea triggers and just inflammation generally from lots of different vantage points. I think one of the downsides of a lot of anti-redness products out there is that they all tend to overlap, or they're reusing the same thing. And they tend to be focused specifically on like barrier repair only, which is great because we need barrier repair in order for skin to function well. But a lot of the time, the reason redness is occurring is different from barrier issues. There could be other things going on. And I find that this milk concentrate has really been designed in a way that's capturing most different reasons that redness occurs, especially even if you have like slightly bumpy textured skin or even like rosacea bumps, for example. It's just really targeting lots of different potential things, and that makes this serum much more comprehensive than I'm used to seeing. It is quite pricey, sadly. There are a bunch of essential oils, so if you're super sensitive to fragrance ingredients specifically, then you might choose to avoid. I actually think a lot of anti-redness products are designed or stripped back or oversimplified in a way that they become kind of useless. So this is quite active, and if your redness is specifically because of an impaired barrier only, then you might benefit from other products more. But if you're the kind of person that's tried a lot of anti-redness things and none of them seem to work, it could be that your reason for inflammation is more related to things like yeast overgrowth, for example. Plus, because this is a luxury brand, the texture is really pleasant to use. It layers super nicely and it smells great as well. So I consider this pretty perfect. Next up is the best recent new release, and I've been obsessed with the Dua Lipa Dua Serum. Their Supercharged Glow Complex. They've just done a really nice job of designing this thoughtfully. That offers sort of antioxidant protection. There are peptides, there are soothing extracts, there's ectoin, there's niacinamide, there's glycerol glucoside. So like a lot like what I was saying for Deliverance in terms of general maintenance, this hits a lot of the things that I would look for. And if I were able to design a product myself, this INKEY list reads very similarly to what I would envision as a really good like daily maintenance product. And as we know, part of the strategy of Augustus Bader's science, as they call it, is a focus on peptide stability and delivery. So I have a little bit more faith that the peptides that are included in here are at least lasting or, getting into the skin in a way that's maybe more likely to deliver some level of result. And one other thing is that in many other luxury brands or high-end products, in a lot of the serum design, they tend to use pigments or like mica or essentially levels of optical blurring that make the skin look more perfected pretty immediately. And that's great. That is the purpose of cosmetics, is to give the illusion of an effect. But from what I can tell, Dieux hasn't really gone down that road. So if you do end up with like a glow in the skin or a healthier barrier, it's actually coming from enhanced skin function and it's not just decoration. So I can see this being a key focus product for me throughout 2026. Now, the last product that I'm going to talk about today is one that doesn't specifically apply to me, and it's the best hyperpigmentation category. As you might have noticed through this video, I tend to focus a lot on anti-redness and inflammation because that's my personal issue. Hyperpigmentation, as yet, that will probably happen one day, is not like a key focus. But I did use one product that I think is extremely interesting that I needed to bring up. It was sent to me by Mrs. Derm on Instagram, and it's the Coleman compound. Now, unfortunately, this is US only. If you happen to be watching me from Australia, hydroquinone itself is still available OTC. So if hyperpigmentation is a concern and you live in Australia, then I would just suggest going to Chemist Warehouse. I think it's called John Plunkett's Superfade, Major Fade, something like that. I'll throw it up on screen. So that's probably a great option to explore if you're in Oz. But hydroquinone has become much more controlled in the US and other markets, so it's becoming a lot harder to get and you probably need a prescription for it. Coleman compound comes in two different versions. So there's like a cream jar and these are like pads. And although they don't directly contain hydroquinone because that would make them a drug, they do use a fairly interesting combination of ingredients which forms an ingredient called Arbutase. And that's basically taking arbutane with an enzyme that they keep separated. And then when you get the products at home, you then have to mix the solution in. So that basically causes this enzyme and the arbutane to interact, and then it turns into hydroquinone on application. So that means these Coleman compound products are essentially an application of hydroquinone, but without the regulatory block. Now, from what I understand of the concept of Arbutase, is because of the way in which the hydroquinone is formed, it should land quite a bit gentler on the skin. Now, that means that most people are able to tolerate it regularly, so daily application of something like Coleman compound should be super easy to integrate. And the dose of hydroquinone is unlikely to be extremely high, so we're definitely not at prescription levels of hydroquinone. This is a much gentler approach, but by using something gentle and consistent that ultimately works in a similar way to a star ingredient like hydroquinone, I'm not surprised to see the befores and afters that are out there and the amazing results that people have gotten. Now, I do think if you're somebody that has super deep set melasma, you'd likely still need the real hydroquinone in a prescription form. But where we're looking at more surface hyperpigmentation and I've seen some claims that this can especially help like reducing the contrast in appearance. So it might not be totally breaking down the melanin in the skin, but it's at least doing enough to where the visibility of it improves significantly that you might not need to jump into hydroquinone territory. The Coleman compound is quite pricey, which is one of the downsides. So if you do have easy access to a derm, it's probably still going to be cheaper to use the real HQ anyway. But for those of you that are interested in more of a cosmetic, easy to get product that is quite gentle, then this is quite an inspired idea. Now, typically I'm not a fan of white label skincare, and from what I understand, this is a white label product. And then the magic part happens with the Arbutase solution. In this case, that doesn't bother me so much because the actual ingredient, but the actual Arbutase ingredient is so unique. That's really what you're buying. So the rest of the formula is there to enhance it, to stabilize it. And in this case, it's probably better to be using a white label because the stability is already pre-done. So yeah, versus most cosmetic options out there, I think Coleman compound is going to be one of the most successful products to use for hyperpigmentation outside of actual hydroquinone. Now, there is sort of a but or caveat to this because something like this is basically emulating a drug action. So you could say this lives in a gray area of drug versus cosmetic, which I know not everybody is going to be comfortable with. And so if you prefer to stick to a more true cosmetic option, I'll just mention that I think the Regimen Lab Level Serum is a really well-designed hyperpigmentation serum. That's going to be even gentler, but it could definitely help with maintenance over time. If you aren't bothered by the drug/cosmetic overlap in the Coleman compound, then if you can get your hands on it, I think you'll be really happy. One last thing I'll mention on Coleman compound is the shelf life is really short, so I think the expectation is that you use it up within 30 days. So this is a very short-term treatment, and of course there is then the whole conversation around usage recommendations. Hydroquinone is normally cycled on and off, and you're not supposed to use it long term, especially if you have deeper skin tone. From what I understand, the risk of using Arbutase is a lot lower just because the concentration is a lot lower, but I would personally not be comfortable using this every day long term. So if you do end up trying this, maybe just use it for that 30-day window and then have a break, and if you need to, come back to it a few months later. So just wanted to insert a quick note on the whole concept of redness and inflammation. You'll often hear me discuss the term redness, so that's sort of the relationship or focus that I have with my skin and therefore the products that I'm choosing to use. But I definitely want to note that the concept of redness is a lot easier to spot in lighter skin tones, and it's something that isn't discussed as much for deeper skin tones because obviously it's not as visibly prevalent. But that doesn't mean that deeper skin tones don't experience inflammation or even levels of redness. I've tried to look into this as best as I can, and the best way that I've seen it described is that kind of redness or inflammation can sometimes appear as like a purplish, dusky grey or brownish hues in deeper skin tone. And often this comes across like subtle darkening versus surrounding skin. And associated with this might be the feeling of like raised bumps that aren't acne or pimples in the skin, even heat and itchiness. So although I've been discussing these products from the perspective of redness, if you do have deeper skin tone, I think everything that I've spoken about can still help with general inflammation and then hopefully help combat some of those signs in different skin tones as well. Well, that's the end of this sort of best of serums list. Thank you very much for watching. As always, let me know in the comments if you have any questions. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.